Just about every luxury car company out there has committed to a fully electrified future, but few car companies, period, have done as much to reach that goal as Volvo has. Volvo has a complete line of plug-in hybrids in the United States. They also have 2 full electric vehicles, and there are more electric vehicles coming up soon. Outside of full EV brands, Volvo has arguably been pushing harder at this goal than just about everybody else. And part of that push is the refresh of their plug-in hybrid system. This model is a 2022 XC60 Recharge, the new extended range version with a bigger battery pack and a much more powerful electric motor in the rear. This is the plug-in hybrid system that you're going to find in pretty much every Volvo in North America outside the XC40, coming a little bit later this year. This one is already in production. When you look at Volvo's lineup, it's obvious that they're serious about electrification and serious about doing it in a pragmatic and measured way. This XC60 was designed from the ground up to be a plug-in hybrid, as well as having regular drivetrains under the hood. And for 2022, almost every Volvo worldwide is going to be at least a mild hybrid. There are a few exceptions here and there, but pretty much everything is going to have at least a mild hybrid under the hood. There are full hybrids available in Europe. When they might come to the US, we don't really know. There are a ton of plug-in hybrids. Again, everything except the XC40 and new C40 are available with a plug-in hybrid drivetrain. And then we have the 2 full electric vehicles. And the next time this vehicle gets redesigned, Volvo has committed to having a full battery electric version available as well. The next generation of this platform is going to be designed from the ground up to accept plug-in hybrid and full EV drivetrains. But back to the XC60 here. We have the very distinctive Thor's hammer headlights there, and I think a very elegant front-end look. I've always loved this design of XC60. It's elegant, it's restrained, it's luxurious. It's not as crazy as the other key plug-in hybrid in this segment right now, which has to be the Lexus NX 450h. There's also, of course, the Audi Q5 plug-in hybrid, but they haven't been as aggressive at deploying plug-in hybrids in the US as Volvo has been. And as we'll talk about a little bit later in the video, it's obvious that the Q5 was not designed from the ground up to be a plug-in hybrid, and as a result, there are a few more compromises than we find in this. The elegant and restrained theme continues around the side, where we find a long hood proportion that we didn't see in the last XC60. This particular design theme is one that we see spreading across the Volvo lineup. We have a relatively short overhang for a transverse engine vehicle. It is still longer than some BMWs and Mercedes, but we have a much longer dash-to-axle ratio than we found in Volvo's prior, and that really gives it this particular elegant look. The XC60 also gets a double wishbone suspension up front for improved handling, and at just over 184 inches long, this is a little bit longer than the Lexus NX, giving you significantly more cargo room in the back. It is a little bit raked back here, but not as raked forward as the Lexus NX, and the result is a squarer cargo area behind as well. Since this generation of the XC60 launched, the rear end has changed ever so slightly. We have full LED taillights up here, and we no longer have visible exhaust tips down at the bottom. This is a change that's coming to all Volvo models. Volvo decided that rather than having exposed exhaust tips or ones integrated into the bumper, that their electrified vehicles, their electric vehicles, and their gasoline vehicles should all look indistinguishable from the outside. Let me know what you think about that down there. That is one of the things I like about Volvo's electrification plans, is that their plug-in hybrid vehicles, they're not drastically differently styled than their regular models, and their EVs are, again, very similarly styled to the rest of the lineup. Now it's time to talk about the big change and likely the entire reason that you're watching this video, the new plug-in hybrid drivetrain. Volvo didn't just give us a new electric motor in the back, they decided to replace the engine as well. This is still a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, but it no longer has a turbocharger and a supercharger. This now just has a turbo. It produces 312 horsepower in its own right, and then in the back we have an all-new electric motor. That horsepower figure in the electric motor goes up from just under 90 horsepower to 143, giving this system a combined output of 455 horsepower and 523 pound-feet of torque. This is by far the fastest Volvo crossover that they have ever built. Backing up the electric motor in the rear is a new larger battery pack, now rated at 18.8 kilowatt hours of capacity, up from just over 11 kilowatt hours. That gives this 35 miles of electric range, and once the battery is exhausted, the new more efficient engine will give you 28 miles per gallon combined. How does that compare to the elephant in the room, which is the Lexus NX hybrid? Well, it is the most efficient hybrid in this segment still. Instead of 28 miles per gallon, the Lexus will give you 36 miles per gallon. Range figures, they're actually pretty similar. 37 miles of range in that vehicle, 35 here in the Volvo. The big difference is the power figure. 455 horsepower, 523 pound-feet of torque in this hybrid, and a 0 to 60 time, according to Volvo, of 4.5 seconds. That is significantly faster than the Lexus NX, and all of that comes at the expense of just 2 miles of electric range. And then, of course, 8 miles per gallon if you do drive your vehicle as a regular hybrid without plugging it in. The larger capacity battery pack is still located right here in the center tunnel, basically between the front seats and just under the dashboard there. The position of the battery pack makes the center console a little bit more bulky. It also results in a slightly higher area right there for the rear middle seat passenger and a tiny bit less legroom for the rear passenger, but it doesn't impact cargo area at all because the battery pack basically lives in the area that the prop shaft for the all-wheel drive system would normally live in. A key reason that Volvo put the battery right here in the middle of the vehicle is to help improve battery crash protection because, as you can see, you'd really have to crush quite a bit of vehicle in order for any sort of impact to actually affect the battery module. The one thing that Volvo has not upgraded on their plug-in hybrid system, at least not yet, is the onboard level 2 charger. It's rated for 3.6 kW. That is a little bit slower than the available charger in the Lexus NX plug-in hybrid, which is about 6.6 kW. That means that this battery will take about 5 hours to fully charge if you have access to the right EVSE. Now, speaking of EVSEs, I really love the fact that Volvo is still giving us a dual voltage EVSE with the car. You can actually see the two plugs there. One is a 15 amp 120 volt plug. This one is a 20 amp 240 volt plug. That means that if you don't want to buy a separate EVSE, you can charge just about as fast as this vehicle is capable of without buying a third-party plug. That's a really handy touch, and it's something that not every EV and plug-in hybrid out there does. As you'd expect in a modern Volvo, front seat comfort is excellent. There have been a few options and features that have been deleted for 2022 in the United States, likely due to the ongoing global chip shortage, but we still have a 4-way adjustable lumbar support, power extending thigh cushion, multi-way power driver seat with a 2-position memory over there on the door, and the passenger seat has the exact same range of motion as the driver's seat, including the 2-position memory. The only thing I find unusual in here for a vehicle that has an MSRP as I'm testing of around $73,000 is that we still have a manual tilt telescopic steering column rather than a power memory linked model. Rear seat room is definitely a big reason to buy the XC60 over a wide variety of the competition, plug-in hybrid or not. This front seat is adjusted for me comfortably at 6 feet tall. I still have about 6 or 7 inches of legroom left. Definitely enough room to put a rear-facing child seat back here, front-facing seats, etc., or taller adults. If I put my head all the way back to the headrest, I still have about 1.5 inches of headroom, even though this does have the panoramic moonroof. Now, the middle seat, as I said before, that is a little bit tighter in terms of legroom, but most middle seat riders here are going to be putting their legs in the outboard footwell anyway, so you're probably not going to notice too much of a difference. Scooting all the way over to the right side, the front seat's all the way back in its tracks, I still have about 3 inches of legroom left. You will definitely find less legroom in the Audi Q5 plug-in hybrid, the Lexus NX plug-in hybrid, and pretty much everything else in this segment outside of something like an Acura RDX. It will have a little bit more room inside. Also better than the Audi and significantly better than the Lexus is cargo room in the back, just over 30 cubic feet of space back here that is identical to the non-plug-in model because of the location of the battery. We still have a ski pass-through, which if I move this bag you can actually see right there, but the rear seats, they're a 60-40 design, not a 40-20-40 design like you do find in some European vehicles. Under the load floor, we have a small amount of additional storage space. This is where you can put your EVSE or other small knickknacks. And then going further in that compartment, we have the 12-volt battery, a little bit of additional storage space, and these silver cylinders, those are for the optional adaptive air suspension. If you don't get the adaptive air suspension, then you do get a tiny bit more room back here. As we look around the interior, keep in mind this is a top-end inscription trim, so obviously there are going to be things in here you don't find on the base model. The controls for the sunroof are right here. It's now a touch slider right inside that little slot, and the sunroof itself is a pretty large panoramic design. It goes to just about the rear passengers' heads. The driver and front passenger get height-adjustable shoulder belts, and in typical Volvo fashion, the front headrests are fixed into place. One of the most striking changes in here is the new upholstery. This is something that's going to be coming to a wide variety of different Volvo models, and it really is interesting for the luxury segment. Rather than imitation leather like we find in so many green vehicles, this is a wool blend. So it's made from renewable wool and some other recycled and renewable materials in there for extra durability as well. I think the design is really striking, and I really hope this trend takes off because these have the promise of being warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer than imitation leather, and imitation leather is where so many other green car companies are going. From this angle, you can see the pretty aggressive side bolstering there, the extending thigh cushion, that front section, including the little winglets that extends, and you can see a little bit better the pattern that we have in this wool upholstery. It's kind of a medium gray, so it's not overly blue like it does sort of appear on camera. As with a lot of modern fabric upholstery, this is treated with a stain-resistant coating, but exactly how durable it will be over time and how that will compare to some of the imitation leather products, I just don't know. All 4 doors are styled basically the same with very similar materials: soft touch armrest, more of that wool fabric right there in the middle, and then soft touch plastics all the way around. There's a bottle holder and a storage area down there at the bottom of the door, and this vehicle has the optional top-end Bowers & Wilkins sound system with the distinctive speakers and speaker grills there on the front doors. Also very distinctive is this large strip of wood that runs across the dashboard. I really love what Volvo has done with some of their wood grains, especially their lighter wood grains. There are a few different ones available in the XC60. Also part of the Bowers & Wilkins sound system is that speaker right up there in the center. We have a stitched leather dashboard, upper section, midsection, and then soft touch plastics below. Glove box has sort of a slight rubbery coating on it, but it is a hard plastic there. It's a decently sized glove compartment. You could easily fit a large tablet computer inside. The other big change in here is the infotainment system, which is now running the Google Automotive operating system, basically the same thing that we see in the XC40 Recharge. This infotainment system is spreading across basically all the Volvo models in the lineup, although not every vehicle gets an update for 2022 and a half-ish. This looks very similar to the previous system because we have these little quadrants here, but the basics of the software are quite different. Most notable thing, we don't have Apple CarPlay yet. That is promised via a software update, but to be frank, it has been promised by Polestar for a while. Polestar is Volvo's electric sub-brand. It's half owned by Volvo and half owned by Volvo's parent company, Geely. This system offers Google Mapping, so if you're just interested in Google Maps, that is native, as is streaming audio, Sirius XM, etc. The XM satellite radio interface, that was lacking for a while, but it is now in the vehicle. Another important change for the plug-in hybrid is that the drive modes that control the way the system works are now located here in the touchscreen infotainment system rather than a separate knob in the center console. This is also where you would adjust how the vehicle uses the battery, whether it's going to automatically decide what to do, hold the charge, or charge the battery. You can do that as well. The screen is also where you would adjust the active safety systems in the vehicle and adjust the air suspension whether you want it firm or soft. Continuing down the dashboard, we have a button bank where we find the hazard lights, defogger, defroster, controls for the infotainment system, a small storage area covered by a roller-style shade right there. That's where we find the 12-volt power outlet, a large expanse of wood trim. I have my phone on there right now. That covers a Qi wireless charging mat, 2 large cup holders, the engine start-stop button, and the shifter. This is a double-tap style shifter. It's a crystal insert right there. You double pull it back for drive, double pull it forward for reverse. Park is that button right there, and if we're in drive and then we pull it back once more, it engages more aggressive throttle liftoff regen. Again, no drive mode selector right there, but we do have the parking brake and the auto brake hold option still. Between the front seats, we have a padded center armrest that opens to reveal a slightly smaller storage area than we find in the regular XC60 because of the battery pack location, and the controls for the heated rear seats right back there. The XC60's color heads-up display is still located exactly where you'd expect it to be, and then we have a full-color LCD instrument cluster for the driver. The display offers 2 basic looks, one with the moving map display that you see in the middle, that's Google Mapping just like we found in the infotainment center, and a look without it. Aside from that, the display doesn't really change appreciably based on the different drive modes, so that's hybrid mode, that's power mode. You can see that we do get a tachometer now over here on the right, but if I give us the map view, doesn't look too different there. In the pure mode, we get a little gauge to help you stay in EV only mode. There's an off-road mode that also gives you that tachometer, and the constant all-wheel drive gives you basically the same look, whether we're in the map mode or in the non-map mode. The view of the instrument cluster is adjusted via this little page button on the steering wheel. We then have this button in the center which brings up the trip computer. Other than that, the steering wheel is basically the same as we've seen before, no paddles on the back or anything like that. The steering wheel is essentially the same round design that we've seen from Volvo before, with sport grips right there. And one thing that I would love to see is a leather airbag cover. That's something that Volvo has done in the past, but for some reason we don't find in their current product lineup. Out on the road, you are definitely going to notice the difference in power, whether we're talking about the pure EV drive mode or the high horsepower hybrid mode. 455 horsepower is definitely a lot for a vehicle in this segment, but the driving nature of the XC60 remains about the same. This has a predictable handling dynamic to it, decent braking numbers, and you'll still hear that 4-cylinder engine sound under the hood. Obviously, I haven't had this at home to run it through my usual battery of comparisons and tests, but according to Volvo, this should be half a second faster than the outgoing model. The pre-refresh XC60 did 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds, just a little bit under depending on the model. And if you were taking a look at the XC60 Polestar engineered, that was about 1/10 to 2/10 of a second faster. This is faster than both of them, whether we're talking again about the EV mode or the high horsepower hybrid mode. The next thing you'll notice about the hybrid system is that it has become smoother than it was before. And I credit a lot of that to the bigger battery that's sitting right here next to me, and of course the more powerful electric motor in the rear. The more powerful electric motor allows the vehicle to torque fill a little bit better when gear shifts are happening, and it also really helps speed up electric to hybrid transitions. Speaking of electric to hybrid transitions, those aren't going to be as common as they were before, because if I put the vehicle here into the pure mode and turn off the battery charge mode, which is an option still available, you can have a reasonable amount of fun in this XC60, even out on favorite winding mountain roads like this, and stay in EV drive mode up to 35 miles. This definitely has the pep now that you don't have to be ultra ginger with the throttle in order to get decent acceleration at the stoplight. Out on a slightly rougher road surface like the one that I'm on here, you will definitely notice the difference in traction between this and something like the Lexus RX Hybrid or the Lexus NX Hybrid, not the plug-in hybrid, of course, because it has a bigger battery pack, so it can send a little bit more oomph to the rear. Traction is definitely more instant in this and definitely better balanced. I've seen a few videos out there where some folks try to take the XC60 or the XC90 a little too far off the beaten path, and I would remind you that if you're going to bring up those kind of videos, this vehicle was not designed with that in mind. This is not a Land Rover, it's not a Range Rover, it's not a Jeep. This is designed to be an entirely capable plug-in hybrid luxury crossover, doing the kinds of things that the average crossover shopper would want, whether you live down a gravel road, whether you want to go to a national park, whether you're on surfaces like this frequently, or you just want extra security in rain, snow, ice, etc. When the road starts to get a little bit more fun and you put the drivetrain in power mode, it's going to be more aggressive at sending power to the rear axle. And while this doesn't ever really feel like a rear-wheel drive vehicle, it does give you a surprising amount of yaw motion back there in the rear. It can really move that rear axle around thanks to the more powerful electric motor, and it is more pronounced than in the previous XC60 Recharge. Of course, this has a reasonable amount of weight still on the front axle, so in neutral handling situations, it's still going to feel a little bit front heavy, but the battery pack and the electric motor in the rear help balance that out more than you think, and the weight balance in this definitely feels more advantageous than in the non-hybrid XC60. Now it's time to talk about range and fuel efficiency. According to the EPA, 35 miles of electric range, 28 miles per gallon. Bear in mind, I haven't been driving this at home, and I've only had about a day and about 100 miles to drive the XC60, but I actually managed to get 36 miles of electric range out of this vehicle. That was a combination of some highway driving and a lot of city driving and city traffic here in Palm Springs. Just a tiny bit of mountain pass driving up here on this road. Fuel economy will obviously depend on how you're driving the XC60, and I was having a bit of fun out here on this winding mountain road, but even that, going up and over this pass here, I averaged 22 miles per gallon. And over my entire day running on gasoline, excluding the battery portion, I averaged 26.9 miles per gallon, which is definitely in keeping with that 28 mpg EPA figure. And again, I've been driving it up and down this mountain pass here near Palm Springs all day. A decent number of people that I've talked to recently about Volvo's plug-in hybrid systems are offended that they don't have a mode to keep you in EV-only mode. It will turn on the gasoline engine if you push harder on your right foot. To them I say, don't push on the pedal so hard. It's pretty easy to keep this in EV mode if you want to, and if you want that extra power, why should I have to engage a different mode in order to get the power? Honestly, it's not a big deal either way. It's more of just a personal preference there, but I do find that this system makes a little bit more sense to me. The way that Volvo has tuned the throttle pedal, it's pretty easy to get it to stay in EV mode if that's what you want to do. EV mode is available to a little over 80 miles an hour, and you can get 0 to 60 in EV mode in about 10 seconds or so. Again, I'll have official numbers once I get this at home. Before we go, I should talk about Volvo's new one-pedal drive feature. Apparently this is a feature that a lot of folks have been asking for. I'm not the biggest fan of one-pedal drive, but here's how it works. You put the transmission into the B mode, so you're in drive, you pull it back one more click to B, then you make sure that the creep option is off in the infotainment system, then you get the one-pedal drive. If you don't have that option off, then once the vehicle slows down to the point where regen braking can no longer slow you down, it will just sort of coast along and you have to put your foot on the brake pedal. Now in B mode, it is not engaging actual max regeneration at the time. There is still a little bit more regen capability in the system, but this has a blended braking system, so that's engaged by putting your right foot on the brake pedal. So even if you brake more aggressively than B mode gives you, you're still recapturing a lot of that energy into the battery. And that's because, again, this has a blended braking system like most EVs outside the Tesla envelope. So whenever your foot is on the brake pedal, regardless of the mode or whether you have that one pedal thing on or off, it's still going to be regenerating power into the battery. Only when those regen limits are exceeded is it going to engage the friction brakes and use those to stop the vehicle. Things are a little bit different in the average Tesla because Tesla chose not to have a blended braking system. So anytime you're using the brake pedal, it's friction brakes. The throttle lift-off regen that you get, that is all you get in a modern Tesla. This is not like that. This is like every other EV sold in the US. So how much will the new XC60 Recharge set you back? Honestly, less than I had expected. This is just $500 more expensive than the previous XC60 Recharge, which is also, again, a 2022 model year vehicle. For that $500, you get almost double the range, 35 miles of electric range, improved fuel economy, more power total, and a significantly more powerful electric mode in the rear for better off-road performance, better winter performance, and just better driving performance, period. The bigger electric motor and the bigger battery pack also enable you to stay in EV mode longer at higher speeds, at higher throttle levels, etc. So if that's something that you're looking for, that is all included on this XC60. But perhaps a bit more important to, I would say, pretty much everybody that's buying the XC60 Recharge is the expanded tax credit. You see, the tax credit is based on battery capacity. And prior to the upgrade, the XC60 qualified for about $5,400 of federal tax credits. Thanks to the bigger battery, it now qualifies for the full $7,500 federal tax credit. And that means if you qualify for it, and logically pretty much everybody buying an XC60 will, this will actually be less expensive than it was before. And more surprising than that, less expensive than the Lexus NX 450h. This is going to start at $54,750, the Lexus at $56,725. If you want the inscription trim of the XC60, that's obviously going to be more expensive. This one started at $62,250, and as equipped, $72,840, plus, of course, destination, which is around $1,000 on every new Volvo in the US. When I really think about it, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised that Volvo kept the price tag so close to the outgoing model. Because again, Volvo's mission has been very pragmatic and very holistic when it comes to their transition towards electrification. The entire mission of their plug-in hybrid systems is to make this a transition vehicle, to get people that would normally have bought a regular XC60 to get a plug-in hybrid system, whether they're interested in the extra power, the extra fuel efficiency, or the all-electric range. Any way you do it, you've moved them into a more efficient vehicle. And then from that point on, transition them later into a full electric vehicle, which again, you can see coming from Volvo over the next few years in this particular size. At the moment, in my mind, there are two direct competitors, the Lexus NX 450h Plus. I apologize if I've accidentally called that an RX. Those names are really close together in my head. And the Audi Q5 plug-in hybrid. But this is quite different than either of those options. Versus the Q5 plug-in hybrid, Audi was going after a different audience. They wanted to make that even more attainable, so it's lower power output. It's definitely not as fun as this hybrid system. The fuel efficiency isn't quite the same. The battery pack is a lot smaller, and it does eat up some cargo area in the back. With the Lexus NX 450h, they went after a really interesting market there. That is a high-performance vehicle for Lexus. It is the fastest version of the NX, definitely not nearly as fast as this Volvo, however. It's about 300 horsepower. This is 455. But it basically has the drivetrain out of the RAV4 Prime, and it feels very much like the average Toyota hybrid. So it feels a little bit like a CVT, a little bit like an electric vehicle. It has an electric axle on the back, but it doesn't produce as much power on that electric axle as this new model does. Even prior to the refresh, Volvo's e-axle in the rear was a little bit more capable and a little bit more sure-footed feeling in adverse weather. And that has really definitely differentiated further with this versus the RX 450h. The NX and RX hybrids and the NX plug-in hybrid also use an electric rear axle like this Volvo does, but the electric rear axle that we find in the Lexus lineup is not as powerful as this one, and the way the software is programmed, it's not as aggressive at sending power to the rear as the Volvo always has been. So this has always been more sure-footed on snow, on ice, in mild off-roading situations, and this is now even more capable with more power and more torque able to go to the rear. As always, be sure and hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen because I will have this in for a complete weekly review just as soon as I possibly can, and that's when I'll have final 0 to 60, 6 to 0 handling and all those other scores. And of course, that's when I will run through the usual battery of comparisons and tests and talk about every competitor that you might want to cross-shop against the XC60 plug-in hybrid. But at the moment, I have to say, if I were recommending a compact luxury crossover and someone was interested in reducing their carbon footprint, shifting some of their consumption over to electricity, this is the model that I would recommend. If you are absolutely obsessed with the reliability, yes, I would put the Lexus NX likely over the XC60. Predicted reliability is a little bit higher there. But for me, the features, the functions, the luxury, the comfort, and the styling of the XC60 simply make it worth choosing this over the Lexus. The Lexus infotainment system certainly has its pros and cons. It's a work in progress, but so is the system in the Volvo. The Volvo has a much larger cargo area in the back. It is significantly faster and more fun to drive, and it has a much larger back seat. The back seat in the Lexus NX is pretty tight. Then on top of all of that, this ends up being less expensive, and that is something that I really did not expect. While you wait for that video to go live, be sure and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so, enable notifications, and of course, check out our EV channel, EV Buyer's Guide. You'll find a link down there as well. Hit me up at facebook.com, Instagram, all those other social places, and I'll see all of you next week.